The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Austin Community College or the art galleries at Austin Community College.
Welcome to the first episode of a limited podcast series that features the artists in the American Roulette Collective. The work of these artists are currently featured in the exhibition American Roulette, Navigating Gun Culture in Our Violent Society, which is being held at the art galleries at Austin Community College, on view from February 25th to June 26th on ACC's Highland campus. My name is Dr. Inayatpour, and at the time of recording, I was an intern with the galleries at Austin Community College. Currently, I'm a UT student studying art history. I did these interviews last summer over the course of a couple of months leading up to this exhibition in order to supplement and add more context and nuance to the content being seen and visualized in the exhibition itself. This is a 4-part series on 4 of the 7 artists who constitute the collective. I'll be talking with Dominic Sansone, an artist from the Chicago area who is one of the co-founders of the Artist Collective.
When I'm in conversations, I try to be very careful about the words I choose. I refer to them as firearms, not guns. It's little things like that. I never use the word assault rifle because I don't want to get into semantic gotcha games.
Michelle Graves, a research-based Las Vegas artist who joined the collective in 2021.
Imagine the moment where a life ceased to exist. So that frozen moment, being in a situation, I had never shot a gun before myself.
Yusuf Del Valle, a sculpture and 3D design professor at ACC.
We're all doing work on different fronts of gun violence. So my work focuses on mass shootings.
And Cesar Conde, a Chicago-based artist who creates large-scale paintings and drawings that highlight social justice issues.
To create that sort of destruction, it'll be a town. It'll be really interesting, and I hope that this senseless killings of innocent children ends. But powers that be, no, we don't have it.
The art galleries at Austin Community College partnered with the American Roulette Collective and began planning the exhibition in 2023. The Artist Collective mission statement reads as follows. The mission of this exhibit is to evoke a needed platform for productive dialogue across cultural and societal divides in order to listen and learn from each other. Violence and disregard for life have become so ingrained in American society and culture, from police brutality and institutional abuse to poverty and domestic violence, that our collective consciousness is now being shaped by paranoia and fear. The media we choose to consume numbs us, and the suffering endured by others becomes nothing more than flickering images on a screen, slowly turning our desensitization to apathy and fascination. The American Roulette exhibit presents provocative artwork influenced by gun culture and violence that comments on different aspects through the unique approaches of each artist.
I know there's been a lot of talk about do video games influence these people that are being school shooters, et cetera. And right up front, I'm going to say no. This has nothing to do with people playing Call of Duty, going out and shooting places up. I think it's more about the glorification in our media of violence and these ideas of, oh, we just need the good guy with a gun to be the John Wick hero of a particular situation, which is just going to end up making things 10 times worse.
Today, we're going to be talking to Dominic Sansone, artist and founder of the Artist Collective American Roulette. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing awesome. So, can you go ahead and tell me a little bit about your background?
So, I never planned to be doing what I'm doing. I don't know. When I was first going into the university system, I started off in engineering. I got typical early 90s advice from guidance counselors. Oh, you're good with computers. You should go into computers. So I initially started off in computer engineering. And about 6 weeks into my first semester, I realized this was a huge mistake and ended up on academic probation that first year with a couple of D's and some courses. I think I had about 12 hours of D credit or so my first year at the university. So I started looking around for other options and thought, well, architecture seems kind of an interesting field and maybe I'll do that. So I looked into transferring to the College of Fine and Applied Arts and got accepted after a year into that college within the university. And then kind of settled on industrial design. That was what I thought, oh, this is, it seems practical. It's interesting. It's making things, but there was a portfolio process for it. My work was actually pretty terrible because I had 0 design or art classes. In high school, it was all math, science. So, all right, what am I going to do now? And I went into just the foundation program at the College of Art and Design, or went through that, and had already gone through that and failed the portfolio review for ID. So I thought, well, I'll declare sculpture as my major, and I'll do that for a year and try again next spring for industrial design. And then I did a bronze pour where we made cast bronze pieces and said, well, okay, I know what I'm doing. And that was it. I did this track then of getting a degree in sculpture. It was a little tough trying to explain that to my father. He didn't even know what my major was until after I graduated because I was terrified of telling him, well, I'm getting an art degree, Dad. And then I stopped making art for well over a decade. I didn't do anything. I went into a couple of different fields that, again, I never expected I'd be in. Just kind of fell into them in different ways. I ended up working in the trade show and museum exhibit business for a long time. I was making drawings for trade show displays, museum exhibits, for either constructing those exhibits or setting them up on site, oftentimes both. And so one of the things I did was I oversaw Apple's worldwide trade show program for 10 years. And it was while that kind of was coming to a close for me that I decided to go to grad school, pursue a Master of Fine Arts. I spent my first winter break in grad school teaching myself how to TIG weld bronze. And then I flew out to San Francisco and oversaw installation crews for Apple at Macworld San Francisco at their last time attending that show. So it was kind of weird. It was a strange sort of dual life for a little while.
So you wanted to do industrial design, but that portfolio requirement kind of sent you into that fine arts direction.
Yeah, because my technical drawing skills weren't really up to snuff. My design skills weren't at this, at the level they needed to be for the competition that was there. And then oddly, I would go into, like a 15-year career of doing CAD drawings in a variety of different industries. So everything from elevator control panels to giant chairs that tip to represent monetary policy to I think what influenced me the most in my art making was I initially spent 2 years in the aerospace industry where I was making drawings for parts for military aircraft, like satellites, canceled next generation field artillery projects, which was a really weird project for an aerospace company to be working on. But yeah, we were working on the Crusader, which was a giant cannon thing that ended up getting canceled by Congress.
So you didn't actually have an aerospace background. You were like industrial design and sculpture, and then you used those skills from CAD drawing to kind of apply those in the private sector?
Sort of. I got this job at this aerospace company, not by what I knew, but who I knew. And so a friend of mine was the CAD manager there at this company, and he offered me a job when I was graduating. And he said, I know you've got a degree in sculpture, but you understand how things fit together. You understand three-dimensional space. You don't have any bad habits ingrained in you already. So we can offer you a job here. We'll train you. The training was kind of minimal. I learned how to use AutoCAD 12 on Windows NT computers with well, at the time it was called the Puck and a Tablet. And it was like this, it was kind of like a mouse, but it had a bullseye crosshair thing on it. And there was a big panel that had all the icons kind of mapped out on it. And so it was before AutoCAD went to a point and click icon based system. And the tablet was just inputting the actual typed commands like automatically for you. So it was pretty miserable. I spent 2 years drawing gears. It was just a means to an end at the time, and the pay was terrible. When I left that place, I was making a little over $12 an hour at the time. It's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. This seems really low pay.
So you were saying earlier how you were kind of on hiatus for a really long time after you got your BFA in sculpture and how you were working. How did that background doing industrial design, how did that feed into your artistic practice being so long that you didn't really make art?
So I think the biggest influence was being in the exhibit industry and understanding the importance of things fitting into freight elevators, things fitting into spaces, getting into buildings with the things that were being designed by oftentimes an outside design firm, and then given to us to interpret their design drawings or to make fabrication prints for our shop to build these things. And then also gaining an appreciation, understanding for you can make very large things out of a whole bunch of smaller things. Apple they would have these giant, we called them theater structures. They were just these big black boxes that they would have in their booth that had a huge screen, and they would show either Steve Jobs' keynote on the screen or they would do demos, but it was like a movie theater size screen. And these giant black boxes were just made out of dozens and dozens, oftentimes hundreds of just 4-foot by 8-foot plywood panels that bolted together on the backside. So I kind of gained this understanding or appreciation that, well, you can take a whole bunch of smaller things that are easy to move around and handle and make something much bigger. I think that was the biggest influence on how I started to think about or make things, how I went about constructing things going forward.
Did you have a specific moment where you wanted to focus on guns more or gun violence?
No, I just sort of saw it as an extension of that. It was a more personal level of violence. I was very into the army man thing. So I had hundreds of little plastic army men, and I had toy machine guns and toy pistols and helmets and outfits and all that stuff. So I saw getting into making artwork about firearms as just another extension of the things I was saying or making about drones or other aspects of the military. And it was sort of a move away from the more aerospace influenced work I was making that was about, like you say, drones, missiles, things like that. There's an antiseptic nature to mass aerial bombardment because there's a distance, and that there's a much different psychological and physiological response to killing someone with a knife, let's say, versus dropping a bomb on them from 25,000 feet or more. So I think there's definitely a huge change in perspective when it's that more, let's say, personal level of meting out death.
You want to talk a little bit about how American Roulette was conceived?
So I had gotten sort of hooked up with representation from an LA gallery, and it all unfortunately completely fell apart before that happened. They were going to give me a solo show out in LA. And so they had things that already started kind of falling apart, and the one half that I was still involved with had moved out of Los Angeles to where they lived in Ventura, which is a little bit north of LA. And so they had the space that they were utilizing there. And I shipped a bunch of my work out for this exhibition, but it was all gun related. It was all these things I had made. It's just at that moment in time. And one of my nephews is really into weightlifting. And so, there's always jokes in the family about, oh, welcome to the gun show, because he's enormous. Okay, we're going to call it the gun show. The whole show was guns, and it was like really weird. This 40-year-old surfer dude came in with his mom, and he was hamming it up, like getting down and like pretending to shoot the rifle and like posing with all the handguns. And it was like, what is going on here? And they're smiling and laughing and taking selfies. And so it kind of started off as this one person sort of idea. And then not since the pandemic, things have kind of slowed for me, but up to that point, I had a pretty good track record going of showing at universities around the country. And a small local community college had offered me a show. They said, we're a little bit worried that there's not any, like, you just got three-dimensional work, and we've got a pretty big space. We've got all the small space. It's going to be empty. There's another local artist that, would you be okay with showing with this person? And I was like, yeah, sure. Who is it? They're like, well, it's this guy, CJ Hungerman. I was like, okay, CJ and I are, we're BFFs. So like, yeah, of course, it wasn't a gun related show, but it got me thinking, this worked out pretty well. And so I invited CJ to show with me at another community college in the area. And that show was called Bang Gotcha Joe, which was my boyhood friend. We've been friends 40 years. Joe, we would play guns all the time. We'd run around the neighborhood screaming and shooting at one another with toy guns. And so it was a play on that. I said, CJ, you want to do this other show with me? It's going to be about gun violence and guns. I'm going to use the stuff I used in California. If you got any paintings that would fit the theme? Oh, yeah, sure, man. So it became a two-person exhibition. And then another friend of ours, Cesar Conde, he was already making artwork about police brutality against people of color. He had a very large series of paintings about that. We said, hey, Cesar, do you want to team up with CJ and I, and maybe the three of us together, we can accomplish something that we haven't been able to individually. There's this opportunity in New York, in Manhattan, that we want to apply to, and having you involved would I think make a huge difference. When I submitted to that for the three of us, I titled the show just Gun. I don't know, I hate naming shows, like it's the worst. And so they accepted our proposal, but they said, the board, it was a Puerto Rican community arts center in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, the Clemente Center. And so they said, the board, they're not real happy with the title. Can you guys go with something else? And so CJ and Cesar and I were texting back and forth, like, what do we call it? We were kicking ideas around. And I suggested American Roulette, sort of on a whim. I don't know, like, I don't even really know what the genesis of that name was, other than it came to my brain. And it's the hill I will die on. The American Roulette has to be in the typeface. Price down, which is the only thing about this exhibition that I absolutely insist on, which is the official Price is Right typeface. So the three of us had the show in Manhattan, and then CJ, Cesar, and I were all in the same gallery that was in Chicago. And there was an event there, and we met a friend of CJ's, Michelle Graves, and we had just gotten back from New York, and Michelle and I were chatting at the reception for this other gallery space in Chicago, and I was telling her about that show, and she said, oh, well, I just completed this commission, and she showed me her works. I was like, wow, hey, we're doing this thing at this other space here in Chicago soon. I'd really like you to be a part of this. And then Michelle got involved, and then we started to, how can we diversify? We'd like to get some other perspectives from people that aren't middle-aged. Well, Cesar's not a white guy, but a bunch of middle-aged white people, like, what can we do to, how can we expand this? And so Michelle said, well, I went to graduate school with this guy, Fala Tamba, who from Africa. He was actually born in Chicago, but raised in Liberia. And he's served both in the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Army. He's worked as a hired mercenary effectively. So he has a very different perspective on firearms. And then Yusuf I met at a iron forge, kind of by total chance. in Wisconsin several years ago, and I got invited to this pour last minute. And Yusuf saw the things I was sharing on social media, and he got in touch with me. He said, "Hey, me and a friend of mine have been talking about doing exactly what you're doing, and it seems kind of crazy for us to reinvent the wheel. Would you be interested in teaming up with us?" And yeah, absolutely. Let's talk. And so we went from 5 people to 7 people, and when our shows have included, community components where we open calls to community members to submit artwork. We did that in Las Vegas. We had a sort of a separate space at a show that we had in Alamosa, Colorado, at the college there where Tony Guntran teaches, that was open to faculty and students and community members. So it's not just about our perspectives and thoughts on the topic. It's, we want other people to have a say, because we want to have other people to have maybe a different perspective. And sometimes we get silly comments, people, one of the pieces in Alamosa was very pro-gun, but in a way that was kind of juvenile. And, and that's fine. I mean, if that's what you want to do, how you want to present yourself to this conversation, that's fine. That's on you. I don't think there's really anything in the show that's anti-gun. Nobody is like, guns bad, ban guns. Like, everybody's coming at the exhibition for a completely different reason, with kind of a completely different message in the larger context of gun violence. And no one is saying ban guns. And I think that's the big thing. Once you kind of express that or make that clear to anybody that's coming in looking for an argument, they go, oh, okay, well, what are we going to talk about then? And then they get really open to discussing.
How do you approach topics that would not always have an easy answer? How do you create space for dialogue in those kind of situations?
I'll present what I feel are oftentimes kind of these provocative or controversial images to people, and they want to come at me with something, and I don't get into an argument with them. I'll just, I kind of calmly explain what my stance is or what the reasoning behind that piece is, and that usually tends to diffuse that person's like attempt to paint me with a particular brush. And then that's when a conversation is able to start about, well, here's what I think. Usually, every time I should say, it's ended with them going, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I get that. I understand that." I mean, there's one piece. It's a 15-foot long AK-47, and it's kind of stuffed with U.S. flags. And there's one that drapes out of it that's been shown widely. It's been from New York to Las Vegas, and even in Lauren Boebert's district in Colorado. And people ask, why are you stuffing, why are you putting U.S. flags in the AK-47, and why not, use an M16? And number one, the AK-47 is the most widely distributed weapon in the world. It's the official firearm of more than 60 nations, REs. There's more AK-47s than all other long rifles combined in circulation. But two, there's this sort of mass media acceptance that the AK-47 is the weapon of the other. That's the weapon of the bad guys. And so to drape this weapon of the terrorists, of the Russians, Cold War era terror device in the American flag sort of changes the perspective of it, that like, oh, maybe we're the bad guys.
Thank you, Dominic, for taking the time to talk with me today. The exhibition will be open through June 26, 2025, in Gallery 4000 on Highland Campus.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the American Roulette podcast. Special thanks to our host, Dr. and Yatapur, for conducting the interviews. Special thanks to Dominic Sasone, Michelle Graves, Yusuf Del Valle, and Cesar Conde for sharing their stories. This series was edited and produced by Marvin Wigfall and Austin Lara as gallery interns through the radio, TV, and film program at Austin Community College, and co-produced by Peter Bonfido exhibition curator and gallery director at ACC, as well as RTF professor Christian Raymond. We show appreciation to everyone at the TAG Art Gallery and everyone on Austin Community College at Highland Campus. For more information about this exhibition and other programming by the art galleries at Austin Community College, go to admc.austincc.edu/tag.